sheet, you can do so at this time. Get you a pencil, something to write with. We're going to be spending the majority of our time in Revelation 12, but we're going to start in Revelation 11. And the picture that you see up on the screen are the things that we're going to read about in those verses. Now, I know it may be a little hard to see, but you'll recognize these things as you're looking at them right now as you go through the verses, just some different things. Remember, we just come through the trumpets, the 7 trumpets. We looked at 6 of those, and now we hit the 7th trumpet on our timeline. Keep in mind, the last judgment each time ushers in the next series. In this case, the 7th trumpet, which is the 3rd woe, if you're keeping count. All right, probably not, but anyway, it's the 3rd woe in Revelation. It ushers in the bowl judgments. And so basically, the 7th trumpet is nothing, all right? Nothing happens as far as like some type of judgment falling. It's ushering in the next set of judgments. And again, that's the bowl judgments. Now remember last week we talked about a parenthetical. That is what we find in these next several chapters, and it's very lengthy. It goes from Revelation 12:1 all the way to Revelation 15:4. And that's very important to understand because if you're reading along through the book of Revelation and you're following a timeline, we have just come to the end of the 7 trumpets. You expect that the next things that Revelation talks about will be the next thing on the timeline, but that's not the case. These things that we're about to read about, which is a summary of chapter 12 all the way to chapter 15, is getting us ready for the next step. In other words, what we're going to talk about are things that happens over the 7-year period, all right, not just the last 3.5. And so you have to understand that in order to understand what's going on here because it'll drive you crazy if you don't. We're going to talk about, in the next couple of chapters, we're going to talk about the persecution of God's children. That's chapter 12. That's what we'll talk about tonight. We're going to talk about the Antichrist. Who is the Antichrist? Do you know? We're going to try to describe him or use the Bible to describe him to figure out what he's all about and what he's going to be doing. Remember, he was called the beast. That was the first time that we had seen that term last week. We talk about the mark of the beast. It's the mark of the Antichrist, all right? And so those two are synonymous, same individual. The false prophet, chapter 13. There's a vision, a heavenly vision in chapter 14. And then we have an introduction to the last half of tribulation in chapter 15. So let's go ahead and read our verses together. And if you have your Bibles, I want you to follow along with me. We'll do this twice tonight, lengthy sections. We'll just read the verses together. So starting in verse 15, Revelation chapter 11. And the 7th angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. At this point in time, the whole world knows who's in charge. All right? His kingdom is about to be set up. In 3.5 years, it's about to be set up on this earth, and he will rule, as we'll see that phrase in just a few moments, with a rod of iron. There will be no discrepancy who's in charge. By the way, who's been in charge all this time? He has. All right? He just hasn't been recognized as being in charge. But he will be recognized and honored and glorified and praised during that time for being in charge. That's what that's talking about. Verse 16, and the 24 elders which sat before God, we talked about them before, on their seats, fell upon their faces and worshipped God, saying, we give thee thanks, O Lord, God Almighty, which art and once and art to come. By the way, another way of saying that is saying yesterday, today, and forever. Just a little different phrasing there. Because thou hast taken to thee thy great power and hast reigned, and the nations were angry. All right, that's up on the screen. Thy wrath is come, the time of the dead, and they should be judged, and that thou shouldest give reward unto thy servants the prophets, and to the saints, and to them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth. And the temple of God was open in heaven, and there were seen in his temple the ark of his testament. Another name for that is the ark of the covenant. All right, we read about that in the Old Testament. Is it actually going to be the same ark? Don't know. Is it going to be remade, renewed, like God is going to do the heavens and the earth? Don't know. But I have a feeling it's going to be a lot better than the first one. Simply because man made the first one, all right? This one is sitting there in heaven. It says, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. So what you have there, as I just mentioned a little while ago, is a summary. All right, those verses that we just read is just simply a summary of what is about to happen in the next several chapters. So that brings us to chapter 12 of Revelation. Now, we're talking about Israel a lot tonight, and that should not surprise us that so much space in the book of Revelation is dedicated to Israel. It has been God's intention all along to deal chiefly with that group of people. They are God's chosen people. Why did God choose them? I don't know. I just know that they're special because his son came out of that line. He came from the Jewish people. And so they are God's chosen people. She dominates the Old Testament. That's what the Old Testament is about. There's some Gentile stories in the Old Testament, but it's primarily about the Hebrews, about the Jewish folks. And we find that God's nation is Israel, and it is a nation of destiny. You see that from all the way from Genesis, and it goes all the way through the book of Revelation. So far, what do we know about the nation of Israel in Revelation? Well, we know that when the timeline begins, all right, the rapture takes place, we're taken out of the world, there is no more church after that. The church is taken out. At the very beginning of the tribulation period, we know that there is some type of treaty that's made with the Antichrist. Israel will enter into that treaty with him. It'll supposedly be a peace treaty. We talked about last week that might be tied in somehow to the temple that's going to be built. We know that from Revelation 7, tells us that 144,000 Jews, servants of God, will be going out to all the world to propagate the gospel. We know that because of their witness, because of the rapture, the effects of the rapture that it has on the world, all the missing people, what's going on, because of the chaos that's going on with all the judgments that are falling, all those different judgments that we've gone through, we know that it is going to just kind of stir people. They're not going to know what's really happening other than that this looks like God's judgment. Some are going to be turning to God, some are not going to be turning to God, and they're going to have the same light. All right, they're going to have the same information. Isn't that the case today? You ever wondered how two people can sit in the same service and hear the same message, same passage, and one respond to God and another one not respond to God? And two people in the same home even, raised up the same way, same light, and still different responses. Well, you're going to have some turning to God, some not. We talked about the great soul harvest taking place. We talked about the Jews rebuilding the temple, Revelation 11. Again, all of these having to do with the Jewish people. We talked about the two witnesses and who they might be. We gave some suggestions last week. We know those two witnesses are going to preach the gospel message. They're going to preach Christ. They're going to be hated by the Antichrist. The Antichrist is going to murder them. Their bodies are going to lay in the street for 3.5 days. But then they are resurrected, and we talked about last week that could be the catalyst that propels Israel into turning to God. That might be the wakening up point for them. And so that's where we come to with chapter 12. Now, there is the timeline, all right? That's what we've just gone through, and just kind of picture right there, we're kind of at that halfway point. In the middle of the tribulation period, Israel will be confronted with the worst wave of anti-Semitism the world has ever seen. Now, it's always been around, all right? Now, let's just, you think of Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler tried to annihilate the Jewish race. That's anti-Semitism. What is Semitism? Well, it comes from the descendants of Shem. Now, who is Shem? One of Noah's sons, right? Ham, Shem, Japheth. All right? The Jewish line came from Shem. So everything that has to do with the Jewish people, the ideas, the cultural things, the religious beliefs, everything that the Jews have a part in is Semitism. All right, you look that up in the dictionary and you'll see that that's true. So anti-Semitism is everything against all of those things. All right? the Antichrist is going to try to wipe them off the face of the earth. Any kind of trace of them, that is his goal, and that's what he's going to try to do. So all of this is going to be unleashed on the Jewish people during this period of time, during the last 3.5 years of the tribulation period. So in chapter 12, we see 4 key individuals. We're going to call them personages. All right, personages. And we see that from verses 1 through 7. We're going to talk about who they are. All right, so starting in verse 1, we see the sun-clothed woman. The sun-clothed woman. Give you just a second to write that down, because I want you to see this verse. Verse 1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. So already in that verse, even before you get to verse 2, you already know something is up. All right, you remember when it makes sense, seek no other sense. This doesn't make any sense. All right, I've never been walking down the street and see a woman clothed with the sun and have her feet on top of the moon. I've never seen that. All right, so we already know that there must be something symbolic happening here. Now, if you back up in that verse, you see a word that immediately tells us this is symbolic, and it's the word wonder. That word wonder comes from the Greek word which means sign. All right, this is a sign. In other words, it is symbolic of something. This is not a flesh and blood woman that we are talking about. Now, there have been many suggestions over the years of who this woman is. The Roman Catholic Church for years, and they still say this, that this woman is the Virgin Mary. All right, if you ask a Roman Catholic today that knows anything about Roman Catholic doctrine, that's what they're going to tell you. But we're not given any indication here at all that this is a physical individual. All right, this is symbolic. There have been others over the years who have said it is the church, that this is representative of the church. Again, this doesn't make any sense because the church has already been taken out. The church really doesn't belong in the tribulation period, so that doesn't make any sense. And then you have individuals like Mary Baker Eddy. How many of you recognize that name? You know, she actually has a longer name than that. Mary Baker Glover Patterson Eddy. She was the one with the Christian Science movement. But she actually thought that she was, and taught this, that she was the woman here in this passage. Can you imagine the gall and the prideful arrogance of that? But anyway, she claimed that she might. This was her quote, and I got this from Dr. Lehman Strauss from the book of Revelation, his commentary there. He said, she added that the man-child that she brought forth is Christian Science, that the dragon is mortal mind, whatever that is, attempting to destroy her new religion. And so everything that was trying to destroy Christian Science was considered the dragon in her mind. But anyway, that doesn't make any sense. Dr. J. Vernon McGee recognized that name. He said that there was a woman in California who was playing with the idea that she might be this woman here, and she was trying to teach that. Now, it is important that we get this one right, though. Dr. Ironside said this. He said, I think I may say without exaggeration that I've read or carefully examined several hundred books purporting to expound the revelation. I have learned to look upon the 12th chapter as the crucial test in regard to the correct prophetic outline. In other words, you've got to get this one right. If you don't get this one right, you're going to be in trouble. He goes on to explain that. If the interpreters are wrong as to the woman and the man-child, it necessarily follows that they will be wrong as many things connected with them. So we have to get the identity of who this woman and the man-child is. Now, the reason that we can know who this woman is for sure is because we are told directly who the man-child that she gives birth to is. In chapter 12, verses 5 and 6, we find out that the man-child, we'll read those verses in a moment, is Jesus Christ. This is Jesus. All right, so we know that this is symbolic, so it's not Mary, the Virgin Mother, giving birth to Jesus here. So who has given birth to Jesus? Well, it's been Israel. He came from Shem's line, right? The Semitic line. And so this has to be the nation of Israel because, again, it follows the logic of the next several verses. It has to be Israel. It's all about Israel. All the judgments, the crusade from the Antichrist is coming against Israel, so this makes perfect sense. Now, the fact that the woman is clothed, all right, she's clothed with the sun and the moon. She's got the sun and the moon around her. Can I say it's kind of illuminating? It kind of tells us what's going on here. Think about the sun and the moon. The moon reflects light. The sun produces light. Who was God's intended source of light going through the Old Testament? Who was he trying to use? He was trying to use his people. Now, they rebelled against God. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. God had to send judgment on them. And so what happens? You get to the New Testament, Jesus comes, Acts chapter 2, the church is birthed, and who now is supposed to be the ones that is giving forth the light? Who? Well, Jesus is the light, and who is supposed to be reflecting that light? We are, right? As the church, we're supposed to be doing that, but keep in mind, we're going to be taken out in the rapture. So once again, that responsibility falls upon Israel during the tribulation period to take that. And again, you see that through the 144,000, the two witnesses. They're supposed to be giving out the gospel message. So again, so because we know who the man-child is, Jesus, we'll get to him in a minute, we can know who the woman is here. So the sun-clothed woman is Israel. All right? So look at the second personage. All right? The devil. We see him in 3 and 4. Let's read verse 3. And there appeared another, what's the word? Wonder. There's that word again that means sign, that lets us know that what we're about to read is symbolic. All right? This is not actual, it's not an actual being. Okay? It is a symbol of something. Another sign in heaven. And behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon the heads. All right, so this is talking about the devil, and I'm going to show you why as you kind of read down through the verses. A lot of people today, I'd say probably the majority of the world today, does not believe that the devil is real. People have kind of played with this idea and joked around with this idea over the years that the devil is this impish type character that hops around with a pitchfork and a forked tail, has horns on, and he's red, and he's got his red jumpsuit on, and he's kind of cool. You might want to hang out with him sometimes. That's kind of the image that people have of the devil. Now, most of the world will admit to some type of evil, some type of outside force or some type of outside evil, but not the devil. The devil can't be a person. Well, the Bible very specifically says he is a personage. I mean, he talked with Jesus. He tempted Jesus. All through the Bible, you find him doing all kinds of different things. He met with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. So he is definitely a personage. He is a being. He thinks. He plans. He is very deceptive. But his names give us a lot of description about him in these verses. All right, so notice his names. Verse 3, a great red dragon. We'll get back to these, okay? That old serpent. Again, in verse 9, the devil. In verse 9, Satan. That word Satan, by the way, means adversary. And he is called that in Scripture. He is our adversary. And then in verse 10, the accuser of our brethren, which we will read verse 10 in just a second. Now, notice the description that's given here in this verse. It's revealed to us he is a great red dragon. Now, why would that color red be used there? I think that is representative of the fact that he has caused so much bloodshed over the years. I think that is symbolic of red blood. Think about how much evil has been done over the years as far as taking people's lives. I mean, just think of abortion. How many innocent lives has been taken there? How many innocent lives have been taken through genocide? The devil's behind all that stuff. And so he cannot take a life. He doesn't have that power. He doesn't have that key in his hand. Jesus holds that key. But he is allowed to influence people to go in that direction. And so you think about the wars that have taken place. Even some, you go back in history with the Crusades. People who claim to be Christians were out there killing people. because they were fighting for a cause. And it just didn't make any sense whatsoever. So I think that's the reason that he appears, at least in John's vision here, as being red. Notice also, he tells us here that he has 7 crowned heads. I believe this is representative of the 7 stages of the Roman Empire, and we're going to talk about this, okay? So if you don't understand all these right now, we'll get to it in more detail, okay? I thought the Roman Empire was dead. I thought that crumbled and fell, hundreds of years ago. Well, it did. Just like every other empire down through the years have crumbled and fallen. It hasn't lasted. But the effects of the Roman Empire are still certainly around. And one of the things, we'll talk about the governmental system of the Antichrist in the next chapter, chapter 13. But the governmental system of the Roman Empire is still in place. It is called Caesarian imperialism. That's what it's called. Dictatorship. Do we have dictatorships in the world today? Absolutely. Matter of fact, that makes up the majority of governments in the world today. We are the exception in the United States. We have a democracy, we have a republic. But most other places in the world, they have dictatorships. And so that came from the Roman Empire. Caesar, dictator. What kind of governmental system is going to be around during the 7 years tribulation? A dictatorship. And so that will be the governmental system of the Antichrist. And this will be the head of those 7 stages. And again, I'll explain that later on. And then it says here it has 10 horns. Those 10 horns, I believe, most conservative scholarship believes this as well, they represent the 10 kings or the 10 rulers that will dominate during the tribulation. These are individuals around the world that wield great power, great authority, 10 of them, and they are going to actually believe that they're in charge of things. That the Antichrist is just kind of their puppet, their mouthpiece. And what's going to happen is, by this description, all right, the 7 crowns, they're going to give their power over to the Antichrist. Now I believe he's going to take it reluctantly. I believe he's going to be one of these guys, well, guys, I don't really deserve this. I don't feel like I'm qualified, but if you want me to do it, I'll take this position for a little while. And he's going to be that kind of guy. He's going to be a silver-tongued kind of guy, and he's going to take it. And little does he know who's been pulling the strings all along. The Antichrist has. He set himself up for this, and they're going to willingly hand their power over to them. Now, they're going to regret that, but they're going to do that for him. All right, so I think that's what this description here is talking about. Look at verse 4. All right, we've seen the names of the devil, now the fall of Satan. Verse 4 says, and his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven. Now, that goes back to a reference in the Old Testament when it talks about Lucifer being thrown out of heaven. He took a 1/3 of the angels with him. All right, so that is a reference back to that. So again, we know we're talking about the devil here. And did cast them to the earth. Now keep in mind, just because he was thrown out of heaven, and the angels were thrown out of heaven, that was not a final defeat of Satan. We know that he roams to and fro on the earth. We know that he's back and forth before the throne of God. We're going to see that in verse 10, accusing the brethren. We know that he is basically over the atmosphere, whatever that means. He has power in the atmosphere. And so he didn't suffer defeat there. All right, that's going to happen later on down in the timeline. But he was cast to the earth during that time. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. So kind of picture this in your mind. This woman who represents Israel is about to give birth to a man-child who is Jesus, and Satan is waiting for that man-child, Jesus, to be born. And even before then, he is trying to take out that, or trying to keep that from happening. He is trying to take away the seed of the woman. Now, let's talk about that for just a second. Satan's conflict with the seed of the woman. That goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, where God made this promise, that it was through the seed of a woman that redemption would be brought to mankind. In other words, without the seed of the woman coming, we would be lost eternally. We'd be lost forever. So he would send someone. Genesis 3:15, we didn't know. All the way through the Old Testament, details are given. New Testament, Jesus comes. He's the seed of the woman. But you find Satan, and by the way, Satan is not omniscient. He doesn't know the mind of God. He doesn't know everything that God does. By the way, if you ever see one of these pictures where it's God versus Satan, man, that is a major mismatch. Satan is not on the level of God. Satan is a created being, all right? And so, but he cannot know the mind of God because he is not omniscient. And so he didn't know how all this was going to play out either. So all along the timeline of history, he has tried to take out the seed of a woman. You find that shortly after the expelling of Adam and Eve and their two sons out of the Garden of Eden. You have Cain killing Abel. Maybe that'll stop the line. Well, it didn't. All right? Then you have the nation of Israel going into Egypt. Surely that will stop the line right there. The persecution of Egypt, God blessed anyway. I mean, you think about what Pharaoh did there, the killing of all the babies. Surely that will stop the line. That didn't stop the line either. You have the polluting of the human race in Genesis chapter 6. You have Haman in the book of Esther. You read about him. He was trying to annihilate all the Jews. Genocide of the Jews. That didn't work either. In the New Testament, you find when Jesus was born, what did Herod do? He sent out a decree for all the babies to be drowned. Again, trying to annihilate the seed. Satan was behind all of these things. When Jesus was on this earth, he tried to throw Jesus off a cliff. That didn't work. He tried to get Jesus to take a shortcut, not go all the way to the cross. All right, hindering the seed of the woman. And I believe he was behind the storm on the Sea of Galilee. You ever thought about that? Why did that storm arise? Jesus is laying in the bottom of the boat, asleep. Again, Satan could have been behind that as well. Does he continue to do that? Absolutely. We've talked about the church age. We've talked about the persecution of the church. He's trying to do away with the gospel message there. You think about the spread of the Islamic faith. You're talking about a polar opposite of Christianity. Islam is the opposite of Christianity. Different God completely, different beliefs, but the spread of that. And then you have all the other religions that's come along that's preached a false doctrine, a false faith. And then you have even people today in churches today who claim to be Christians who are preaching a gospel that is apart from the repentance of sin. What is he doing? He is trying to get people further and further and further away from the truth. He has tried it. It has not worked. It will not work during the tribulation period either, when he tries to annihilate the Jewish people. That brings us to the third personage, and that is the man-child Jesus. And we see this again a while ago. I mentioned verse 5. Let's read it. And she brought forth a man-child. Notice he was not successful in this verse. He was standing there. He was going to devour this child. He was going to destroy this child. He's not successful because this child was born who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. When's that going to happen? The millennium. There's always been rulers in the earth, but there's never been one ruler that ruled the entire earth. Jesus will be that ruler. He will rule over the entire earth with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up into God and to his throne. There's only one individual that fits that description, and that is Jesus. After Jesus died, he resurrected, and then he ascended back up to God. He took his rightful place on the right hand of God. So again, that fits Jesus perfectly. So again, we know that that's who this verse is talking about. Look at verse 6. And the woman fled in the wilderness. All right, here goes the anti-Semitic crusade. The Antichrist comes after Israel during the last 3.5. What happens here? She flees to the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared by God. Now that's interesting. God already knows what's going to happen ahead of time. He already prepares a place for her. That's just like the children of Israel during their 40 years of wandering. They were so worried about where's the food going to come from? Where are we going to find water? How are we going to be protected? How are we going to be taken care of? God had a plan all along. And God did do that. I mean, their shoes didn't even wear out. They didn't have to go to Walmart to get groceries. It was right there outside the tent every morning. You know, God fed them. God protected them through the cloud by day and pillar of fire by night. God did all those things for Israel for 40 years. He's going to do the same thing for them during these days, during this last 3.5. And it goes on to say there that they should feed her there 1,260 days. Now, I want to put up a chart here for you because I want you to notice this. You have different types of measurement as you go through the book of Revelation, but they're all talking about the same amount of time. All right? 42 months, 3.5 years. 1,260 days, we just mentioned that. That's the second one right there. Woman fled into the wilderness. All right, those are in days. Then you have times, and a half a time. We'll read that in just a few moments. And then 42 months, we'll get to that in chapter 13. It's all talking about the same period of time. So when you see that, it's talking about the same 3.5 years, the latter half of that. So I want to put that up there. The 11th chapter of Daniel speaks of a world war taking place at that 3.5 time slot there. There's going to be a world war. That means every nation on this earth is going to be at war, except for a couple. And those couples are Edom, Moab, and Ammon. Now, if you look at a biblical map there, you find out that that is in the Jordanian area, the Jordan area. Perhaps that is the area that God has prepared for them. Everybody else is fighting. I mean, there's a war going on, and you have this hand of protection around this place right here where God's people, Israel, has fled into the wilderness. That may be the case. I don't know. I've heard some people over the years talk about Petra. Petra's in that area. If you've ever seen pictures, if you haven't, look it up online. It's unreal. I was talking to Brother Henry and his wife a while back. They had just taken a trip over to the Holy Land. They said it's one of the darkest and most pagan places they've ever been to. It has idols up everywhere in there. But some people have said over the years that is a perfect fortress. That if you were going to hide and stay away from it, that would be the perfect place to go. Maybe, perhaps that's it. I don't know. But I do know this. When Satan, the Antichrist, unleashes their wrath on the nation of Israel, God will protect them. He will take care of them. And it goes back to this promise that God made in Isaiah 33:16. He shall dwell on high. His place of defense shall be the munitions of rocks. Bread shall be given him. His waters shall be sure. God is going to take care of his people. Why? Because God is faithful. That brings us to our fourth personage, and that's the archangel Michael. And we read about him in verse 7 of this chapter. Notice verse 7. This thing just went absolutely crazy. I need somebody to... not sure exactly what happened. Are we back? I don't know what happened right there. Let's go back. That must be the devil right there trying to get into it. All right, here we go. The archangel Michael, verse 7. Let's go back. There we go. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. Who's the dragon? The devil, right? And the dragon, the devil, fought and his angels. So you got this war taking place. Michael is with the holy angels of God, the devil and his fallen angels, and there's going to be this war. So you're going to have this war going on earth, but at the same time, and some writers believe it's going to be a series of wars that takes place in heaven. Now, there are two angels. Before we get to the war, there are two angels that are mentioned in the Bible. If you have angels in your head, names of angels in your head other than these two, you probably got that from Roman Catholicism, all right, because they've come up with some different names. But these are the only two that the Bible mentions. There's Gabriel, and he is known as the announcing angel. Gabriel was the one who came to Mary and told her she was with child. She was going to have the Christ child. And then you also have Michael. And Michael is the commanding general. And it seems that maybe he is in charge over the host of the angels in heaven. That is his responsibility. Now, it has been suggested, all right, some have written about this, that Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28 kind of lead us to believe that Michael is the superior of the majority of angels. In other words, he has the greatest authority, the greatest power over any of the angels. But we have other passages in the Bible, like from Jude, that lead us to believe that he is maybe less powerful than Satan is. That Satan was given more power of some kind. I don't know exactly what all that means, but the reason we say that is because in Jude, I think it was 6, I think that's where it is, it says there that he was contending for the body of Moses. Satan wanted to get a hold of the body of Moses because he wanted to turn it into a shrine or a relic or some type of idol, again, to divert the attention of God's people. And Michael contended for that body. But it says there in that passage of Scripture that Michael did not rebuke him by his own power. Let me read it to you. It says, he did not bring against him, Satan, a railing accusation, but said, the Lord rebuke thee. That's in Jude 9. I said Jude 6 a while ago. It's Jude 9. The Lord rebuke thee. Now, that is a great example for you and me. Because if Michael, the archangel, is not powerful enough to overcome Satan, what in the world makes us think that we're powerful enough to overcome Satan? We can't. Satan will beat the stuffing out of us. We only can overcome Satan through the power of Jesus Christ. And that's exactly what he did here. He called upon his name, the Lord rebuke thee. So we submit ourselves to God. God can certainly handle him. So he is the one that leads this charge in this war in heaven found in verses 7 through 11. So read about this with me in your Bible starting in verse 7. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Now let's just stop there for just a second. Remember a while ago we said that Satan was cast out of heaven with a third part of the angels, but that did not limit his access back to the throne of God. But this does. The door has been closed on him here. In other words, he has had access to go back and forth to the throne of God, to accuse us. We'll talk more about that in a second. To be in the atmospheric heaven. There's a war going on there in heaven. But here he will be confined to the earth. And that is going to make him so very mad. He is going to be limited to the space of the earth. Now notice the reaction in heaven, verse 10. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now has come salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. They've just seen the demonstration of the power of Christ through Satan out of heaven. You don't come back. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. That is the power of Christ. Now, in the middle of the tribulation, again, is when that happens. Great rejoicing, we saw that, in heaven takes place, but there will not be great rejoicing on earth because Satan is here and he's not leaving. And he is unleashing his wrath on all the inhabitants. Let's see. Well, let's talk about this before we move on. Verse 10 talks about him being an accuser of the brethren. I want you to picture this in your mind. I preached a message on this a while back. But Satan is kind of like a prosecuting attorney. And he accuses us all the time. You think about Job in the Old Testament and how Satan went before God and he's accusing all of humanity. And they're not all they cracked up. They're not who you think they are. And have you considered my servant Job? Well, that's what Satan does. He accuses us. He tries to say that we're nobodies. We're a terrible creation. God made a mistake. And so he's making all these accusations. And by the way, when Satan makes an accusation against us, most of the time he's exactly right. When he calls you a sinner, Just agree with him. Yep, I'm a sinner. You know, you fail God. Sure do. Sure do. You don't deserve heaven. You're right. I don't deserve heaven. But even though he's right about those accusations, we can overcome him. We are overcomers, right? Isn't that what Revelation talks about? We're overcomers. How are we overcomers? All saints have the same three things. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb. Can't save me, but the blood of Christ sure did. So when Satan starts attacking me, and there's been certainly many, many times in my life that I know he had unleashed an attack on me. Sometimes it's been on my family. Sometimes it's been on my ministry. When I recognize that, my first response should always be, remind him of the blood of the Lamb. You don't have any power here. It's not me you're attacking. I'm a child of God. All right? I've been saved by the blood of the Lamb. You can't get to me. I'm covered by the blood. Start singing songs about the blood. He doesn't like that too much. They overcame him by the word of their testimony. Again, it's not something that you've done. Your testimony is connected with Christ. Forever and ever and ever, you're forevermore connected with him. That's your testimony. You have been saved by him. And they loved not their lives unto death. Overcomers are more concerned about pleasing God than they are saving their own lives. And I think that's what Jesus was talking about when he said, he that findeth his life shall lose it, but he that loses his life for my sake shall find it. All right, so let's get back to this crusade. Satan's final anti-Semitic crusade found in verses 12 through 17. All right, verse 12. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. All right, rejoicing and going in heaven. But notice the contrast here on earth. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having a great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. How long has he got? 3.5 years. That's it. He knows that. You know how he knows that? Is he omniscient? No, he reads the Bible just like you and me. He knows. He knows the timeline. 3.5 years. I got to get busy. And when the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. And so he makes an all-out assault on Israel at this point. He is angry. He's upset. He knows he has a short time. So he's got to do everything possible that he can. So what is the thing that he does? Here it is. And by the way, over the next couple verses, we see the activities of what he's going to do over these 3.5 years. Here we are. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle. In other words, she escapes. The devil comes after her. She escapes to this place that God's prepared, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time. How long is that? 42 months, which is 3.5 years, and you could give me the days too. From the face of the serpent. All right, so she's going to be there all that time. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. So this is the attack that he unleashes. There is a flood of some kind, and it comes out of his mouth. Now, what could that flood be? That has been debated for years. Let me give you the top 3 suggestions, all right? 1, it could be that Satan will divert rivers of bodies of water to drown Israel. Over in the Holy Land, when a downpour comes, they have flooding. All right, just about every place that you have, dry areas, that is the case. Water just runs through it. Maybe that's what's going to happen here. He's going to divert rivers. He's going to use some kind of body of water there to try to drown her physically. All right, that's one suggestion. Second, Satan will attempt to flood her with false teaching. Now, he's already doing that. He will do that with the Antichrist during the tribulation period, lying wonders. All right, a great deception. All that's happening during that time. So I don't think that that's the case. I think it'll be going on, but I don't think that's what it's talking about here. There's a third suggestion, and this to me makes the most sense. Okay, and I'll show you why. Satan will send in a great army of men. I think in your notes I put mean. All right, so you changed my spelling there, okay? They're going to be mean, but they're going to be men to try to kill her. Satan's going to have at his disposal all the armies, basically, of the earth. Remember those 10 kings a while ago? We said that they're going to give him all their power, all their authority. All that military power comes along with that. And so they're going to come against Israel. And they're going to try to I don't know if they're going to use nukes. I don't know what they're going to do, but they're going to come to try to destroy Israel. But notice what God does in this next verse. Something supernatural happens. And by the way, the reason I think this is an army of men is because that word flood is used in the Old Testament. In Isaiah 59, verse 19, and there it is used in connection with an army of people. All right? So that's why I think that that's the flood that it's referring to here. So the flood, this army of people, comes against Israel, and what does God do? And the earth helped the woman. Now, I don't see any indication that that word earth there is symbolic. All right? It makes sense that this is the earth that God is using. And we even have a story in the Old Testament. You see if you can remember the one that parallels this, all right? The earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood, the army of men, the army that's coming against Israel, which the dragon, the devil, cast out of his mouth. So what story in the Old Testament comes to your mind when you think about the earth opening up? Yep. There was a fellow by the name of Korah. There's a name. Go back and look up that name. Korah led a rebellion against God and against the leadership of Moses. And Moses said, all right, we're going to draw a line. And he draws, not literally probably, but he drew a line. And he said, okay, all of you who are on Korah's side, you want to go that direction, get over there with him. All those of you who are on God's side, get over here with me. And as soon as that division took place, God opened up the earth and swallowed them. That was God's judgment on them. Could God do it again? Absolutely. I don't care how big this army is. He can open up the earth and swallow all of them. And again, it would be something supernatural, only something that God could do. But again, whatever the enemy is, whatever the flood is, something supernatural will happen in order to protect his people. Final verse, verse 17. And the dragon was wroth. Oh, he's hopping mad now. With the woman, with Israel. Can't stand Israel. Why? Because they're God's chosen people. He cannot stand them. That was the line that Jesus came from. And he doesn't like them at all. And he went to make war with the remnant of her seed. I love this. The remnant of her seed. What does that mean? This is the last generation of people from the Jewish line. These are the last Jews that will be born. This is it right here. And notice they're called the remnant of her seed. All right? So these are Jews, but notice the difference. All through the years, for the most part, the Jews have rejected the Messiah. They've rejected Jesus. They believe in a Messiah. They're still looking for the Messiah, but they reject Jesus as the Messiah. To this day. All the way through Revelation, all the way to that 3.5 year, and again, the two witnesses being resurrected could be what is the catalyst for allowing them to go in this direction. But with all that, the witness of the two witnesses, the witness of the 144,000, the seeing the demonstration of God's power taking care of them, seeing God's grace extended again, something turns their attention around, turns their heart around, and notice it says they keep the commandments of God. All right, so their attention's to God, they're doing what he says, but the last part is the telling part, and they have the testimony of Jesus Christ. What does that mean? Do you have a testimony of Jesus Christ? Of course you do. If you're a believer, you have the testimony of when Jesus saved your soul. They're going to have that same testimony. Are they going to come a different way than us? Nope. They're going to come the same way. They're going to come by the way of the cross, by putting their faith and trust in Jesus Christ. And this remnant will finally turn, after all these years of being rebellious to God, they will finally turn toward God during that last 3.5 years.